Howdy, partners. You're listening to Conversations with Jacob, hosted by my good friend, Jacob Waller. Make sure to check out the podcast where podcasts are available and check out the video version on YouTube. You can follow us on social media. Facebook is Conversations with Jacob. Twitter is at CWJ Podcast. And you can visit our website, conversationswithjacobpodcast.weebly.com. Hey, you got a show idea? Maybe a guest suggestion? Email us at conversationswithjacob@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Jacob Waller.
And what's going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Jacob. By the way, today's episode is number 50. So we came a long way from episode 1 to episode number 50. Of course, and we got a good episode lined up for you. I say that all the time, but it's the honest truth. What you heard Jake Thorne was on the intro with the Facebook and Twitters, and also the email and website. Make sure to check those out. On the website, upcoming episodes, past guests, and every once in a while, there'll be something special on there. Also, if you're into podcasting, check out a podcast that airs every Monday. I think it's at 7 o'clock. I could be wrong. It's called Two Chairs, No Waiting. It's an Andy Griffin podcast hosted by Adam Newsom. He's also a tribute artist. He does Floyd the Barber for events. Check it out, twochairsnowaiting.com. And also, was also Mr. Adam Newsom, who will be here on the podcast probably in March. And joining me today is Mr. Regan Forston, if I pronounced that right.
You did.
I just want to make sure. Today, and we're going to talk about, I guess, the other side, the afterlife. And Reagan's going to take the floor here. And if I got any questions, I'll jump in. So, Reagan, and welcome to the podcast.
Okay, nice to finally talk to you, Jacob.
Oh, yeah.
What are just curious, in your podcast you're doing there, what are some other interesting topics that you've found kind of stimulating?
Oh, boy. Well, and there's been over about 50 different topics. So, it's kind of hard to just pick one.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you pick like my topic today would be considered a little out there in a sense, because we're talking about the afterlife, something kind of mystical and that sort of thing. But are some of your guests like similar? Like, do you ever have mediums on or?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because back in November, I had a medium on.
Yeah.
Sure did. Yeah.
Because that's this. We're kind of finding out in this afterlife research that we're doing through the Newton Institute here that so many things are changing in the world right now. In other words, even the topic that I have right now, if I talk to people and said, hey, I've been to heaven 2 times and back, and they go, oh, that's weird, or you're strange, or come on, you have to, something weird. The first thing to come along was when people had like near-death experiences, and there were books way back in the 80s, 90s, and that were just about people that had a car accident or something, and they found themselves in another world, and they came back, and everybody was so interested in those, and so many then people started coming out of the woodwork that had those experiences that were afraid to talk about it because they thought that people would make fun of them, but that opened up the door in a sense, and then you find out that, millions of people have had either out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences or some sort of visions and that sort of thing. What we're going to talk about today is a very practical and very scientific way of visiting the afterlife. In other words, we found a process at the Newton Institute here that allows anybody, I say anybody because these sessions are about 80% successful on the first try. And then some people come back for a second try, and about 50% of those are successful. So, we say we have a success rate of over 90% of people being able to go to heaven or the afterlife. It's funny in those terms and the words we use, because we're talking about the same thing, but different people that have different spiritual viewpoints. Some say, oh, I don't like the word heaven because it sounds too churchy. And, but anyway, today when we say the afterlife or heaven, it's interchangeable. But now there's a scientific way to do this where people can spend hours in the afterlife exploring. I'll go through what a typical session is that we do. We've helped about 70,000 people so far, Jacob.
Oh, wow.
Go to the other side and back. And I'm 2 of those sessions. So for me, I know it's real because I've had the experience, but it sounds unbelievable. It sounds a little bit like Twilight Zone or something, or, how could it be that we all have the natural ability to, go to the other side and back. I don't know, like yourself, Jacob, have you ever had anything which you would consider like a spiritual experience with, like in a dream state, having a fabulous dream, or?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, even just me having this conversation today and people listening to your podcast, it's going to open up subconsciously something. And I know after I've given some talks, sometimes people say, hey, I went home that night and I'm in a dream state. I had like an angel appear to me or something, because it kind of cracks open that, when you believe that it's possible, it kind of opens up that where you get more light coming, from the other side coming into yourself. So this process through the Newton Institute is called Life Between Lives. And I'll tell you how this was accidentally discovered. Some of the best things in the world, happen accidentally. Like scientists are trying thousands of ways of doing something, and then somebody spills something on something that causes something, and then, oh my gosh, there's their answer. And then they have some great new invention or something. Michael Newton, back in the 90s, he was a hypnotherapist, and he had a man that was in hypnosis, and he was trying to help I forget if it's lose weight or stop smoking. That's the go-to or the bread and butter for hypnotherapists. Anyway, it was time for the man to come out of hypnosis, and the client says, no, I don't want to come out of hypnosis. I want to stay here, and I want to go home and visit my friends. And the therapist he says, well, I'm just going to wake you up and you're going to go home and see your friends. And the client says, no, I want to see my friends. And then at that very moment, all of a sudden, the client who's in hypnosis is starting to talk to other people. And he's going, whoa, what is this? Well, long story short, he was back home at what we now call a soul group. And these are souls that we regularly incarnate with. In other words, it's kind of like your favorites, like over millennia, all these trillions of souls on the other side, you've got a group of really people that are kind of tight, and they like to help each other evolve. So they decide to come down and incarnate in a physical form so they can have certain experiences, so they can learn more about love and kindness and compassion and that sort of thing, kind of fine tune themselves in a way. So Michael was such an inquisitive kind of person that he says, wow, that was weird. He says, he was agnostic. He didn't know if he believed in God or not, but he says all of a sudden he's talking to all these people and they seem to be like in heaven or something. So what he did is he found a way and he proceeded to do the same thing with 7,000 people. Wow. That's a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
So when somebody was in the afterlife, he was so inquisitive and so curious about everything. He would keep pushing the limits and telling the client, say, okay, now that you're there, ask him about this. What happens about this? What happens about this? What do you do now? What do you do there? So after the 7,000 sessions, he pretty much had mapped out what happens when we die, where we go, and what we do when we're in the afterlife until we decide to come back again, or as he found out, or not come back again. That's some people don't realize that in this research we've done with all of these sessions, we pretty much know that, you know, we're the ones that decide what we're going to do. We have guides and we have counselors on the other side that'll kind of guide us and everything. But the final decision we found is the soul itself is deciding, you know, I'm going to go down and have this life or have that life or whatever. So as he was getting older, he realized that he had just stumbled on like one of the most magnificent things in the whole world, that realizing that any of us can actually, you know, go back, you know, visit heaven a bit here and there, and have that ability. And so as he was getting older, he said, I have to teach other people this process. So he started the Newton Institute about 15, 16 years ago, and he started training other people. So now he passed on about 8 years ago, but we've continued the Institute. We're continuing his work, going deeper and deeper into things about what happens when you die and, you know, what's heaven like and so forth. So there's 250 of us now, and we're in 46 countries. We cover about 8 different languages. And because of COVID, we started doing these online, Jacob, just like we're talking to you now. And we had no idea that our success rate would be still the same. I mean, it's like this process, it's just, I don't know, it's just amazing. Like when I do these online for people all over the world, all they do, they're like where you're sitting right now, they just have a comfortable chair and they lay back and we have the session and boom, Jacob, you would just find yourself, you know, over there for a couple hours, having the time of your life.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Now, when these people go to the other side, can they have like a full-on conversation with the people in the afterlife?
Yeah, people will have conversations just like you and I are having a conversation. Now, one of the things that we do, Jacob, is when someone wants to have a session, I send them homework. 3 things that they do. They make a list of questions that they want to have answered about their life, okay? Because everybody gets to go before a council. Everybody, so far that I've done the hundreds I've done of these, people have their own special counsel and the council seems to know all about them already, and they can ask questions about, you know, about their love life, about their future, about their jobs. And they can ask questions about God. You know, a lot of people ask things about like, okay, I've read the Bible, I've read the Quran, I've read all these things, you know, tell me what's really true. And they ask all kinds of questions. And the thing that's cool is they'll answer practically any question that you ask.
Wow.
They might say, you know, why am I having such a hard time with my boss who I feel like I want to stab to death, you know, like, you know, or, you know, why can't I get along with my children, or why are my wife having such a hard time and things. You can answer all kinds of questions. Number 2, what they do is they write down a list of the cast of characters that have shown up in their life's play. Like if you were in the audience, Jacob, and you were watching your life, okay, act 1, here's the important people. Act 2, here's the people that showed up. Act 3, you know, it's a good way to kind of visualize it, you know. So they write down and they write down the good, the bad, and the ugly. In other words, the people that they love dearly, you know, and the people that are their adversaries, you know, the people that they have issues with. Now, here's the best thing I think about this whole thing, Jacob, is that when you decided to come down and be Jacob, you didn't put all of your soul self into Jacob's body. You kept about half of yourself back home where you were created, back in the afterlife, which means, Jacob, that each of us has a higher self that's always there. Okay. Anybody that's ever lived in the world, even if they've reincarnated again, half of them is still back home. So what this means is, Jacob, when you are there in the afterlife, there's a time when we ask permission for you to visit your soul group. And these are the souls that you normally incarnate with. It's like a homecoming kind of party for you. So all of a sudden you're at the soul group and you can have conversations with people that have passed on. Like if you, like me, my mom, my dad, my brother were in heaven already. And I was able to, when I had my session over there, I was able to see all 3 of them. which was wonderful, seeing my mom, my dad, and it was like a homecoming. But you can also talk to the higher selves of people that are still alive in your life. For instance, a lot of times husbands and wives love that because they can talk to the higher self of that person that they're in love with, that person that they're married to. And they can ask them, they can say, hey, how am I being as a wife? You know, is there anything that your self that's down here is lacking? You know, what do I need? Or they can say, why are we always arguing about this? What am I supposed to learn from this? You know, I've had a few people, couples come to me for couples therapy. Imagine that, Jacob. So one day I'll have the wife go to heaven and talk to her higher self of her husband about their issues. The next day, vice versa. And then we get them together. So once they've talked to each other on the other side, which is their best part of themselves, okay, then they pretty much know what their argument's all about, what they're supposed to learn from it. And they have to decide now, are they willing to do the work when they come back that's going to take to make this marriage work, you know, that way. So it's pretty, there's so many things that can be done with this. So do you have any relatives that have passed on, Jacob?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my grandma passed away in 2021.
Wow. You know, yeah. I never realized how important grandparents were because I never really had grandparents. I mean, we would see them once or twice a year at Thanksgiving or something, but they were never around me. They never, you know, they never mentored me or taught me anything. They were just kind of there. And when I had my session, and of course, my book that's online anywhere is 3 hours and 33 minutes in heaven, 3 hours, 33 minutes in heaven. And I describe in there how one of the things that happened in my journey over there was something I did not even remember when the session was over, but I listened to the recording because we record all these so people can listen to them. Okay. When I listened to the recording, I'm asking the council, I said, look, I know I'm doing pretty good on my, because I found out on the other side that my reason for being born was to practice selflessness, to practice kindness. Okay. And the council said, Regan, you're doing pretty good. We're pretty proud of you. You haven't been perfect, but you're doing pretty good. Okay. And then I said, well, what else am I missing here? And they said one sentence to me that I didn't remember until I listened to the recording. And then they moved on to something else. But they said, Regan, you could be a better grandfather, you know, and then boom. And then we talked about something else. I have 9 grandchildren and I've always just thought I'm just grandpa that comes and they see and, you know, whatever. But I listened to that advice and I began in the last 6-7 years developing a relationship with my grandchildren. And it has been amazing. So you must have had a good, your grandma was special to you, was she?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was her first grandson.
Oh, wow.
And I'm also loyal. Yeah, very much. Now, when you say that you record these, do you hear the person doing it, the voice, and also do you hear the voices on the other side?
No. Right. What I'm doing is like I'd be sitting next to you. Now, through this process, people are totally aware that this is going on. This is what's interesting, Jacob, is that we seem to have this ability to be in 2 places at once. For instance, if you were having a session, I'd be sitting next to you or be on Zoom. We're communicating because you're telling me what's going on, you know, what questions are, how they're answering your questions and so forth. But at the same time, you find yourself there. It's the coolest thing. It's like a split screen. You know, it's like you're in this other realm and seeing everything in full color. And then at the same time, you're going, oh, yeah, Regan, this is what it's like we're in a movie theater watching a movie and I'm blindfolded and you're telling me what you're seeing. Okay. Oh, yeah. It's now when I had my session, as magnificent as it was and life-changing for me, the first 2 or 3 hours after the session, I was kind of depressed and I was kind of thinking, what was that all about? You know, because physics is different over there than here. So I had made up in my mind what I thought it was going to be like what I thought I was going to be seeing and how it would work. And it was way different than that. But that's the part that makes it so real, because you go, wait a minute, I couldn't have just made that up, because I couldn't have even thought that things, because like what, say you're at your soul group, Jacob, and I say, okay, now look around and see if your mom's there, and you go, oh, there's my mom. And I'll say, okay, describe her to me. What's she look like? Now you're in this trance state. So it's seeing your mom as a ball of energy, or kind of physical and kind of energy, is just normal and natural. Like sometimes people say, oh, there's my dad. And I'll say, what's your dad look like? And he said, oh, he's glowing like this orange and green and that. And then sometimes on the other side, they'll show you themselves as like you remember them, like you can say, oh, I can see because there's my dad's face. But sometimes you're seeing the face and the rest is like energy, because what we found out, Jacob, that in our natural state, when God created us, we are conscious energy, glow, colored conscious energy. Sometimes when people meet their guide, and that's the thing too, in one of these sessions that's so amazing, is that everybody gets to meet their person, the soul that's kind of watching out for them on the other side. Like right now, Jacob, even right now, somewhere in your room right there, you've got a guide or someone that's kind of watching what you're doing. And people go, oh, I don't want them to see, hey, they know everything over there. So, our bad habits and things like that, it doesn't matter, because it's a different thing. But that's really a neat thing, because the three things that the other side wants people to know here, and the reason they've opened up this portal so that people can get a glimpse of heaven, is they want people to know that their life has meaning, that they're down here on a mission to learn something or to teach something, to make the world a better place. They've come down here. The second thing they want people to know is they're never alone. I mean, you've got a team on the other side rooting for you, that you're going to come down and you're going to get done what you plan to come down and do. And the third thing is that heaven is real, that there is an afterlife. So knowing those three things, when you go, okay, I've been there, I know this is real, I know my life is got a meaning here, and I've got something that I'm supposed to be doing to contribute to society, all of a sudden you stop playing the victim anymore. Like, God dang, what's happened here? God, why are you being so mean to me? You realize that you signed up for this class. Yeah. So what can you, it's like you go to college and you're taking this grad course or something, and then you're in there and you're cussing, like, why did I even take this thing? This is stupid. What was I thinking? This is too hard. I cannot do this, but you kind of hang in there because you knew you signed up for this and you knew you wanted to get that degree. Okay. That's kind of what life is like. Now, when you get onto the other side, it's kind of like, whew, oh man, that's, you go and you go, that was so worth it from what you learned, Now, Jacob, to get to the afterlife, what we do is, let me go back to the third thing. Okay. First thing, you write a list of the cast of characters, a list of questions you want to have answered. The third thing that I have my clients do is write a list of any health issues that they have concerns over. And almost everybody has something wrong with their body, whether it's just diabetes or something. But some people come to me that have cancers and have, these very, very bad illnesses. Now, when you're there, see, I'm certified with Michael Newton's school, but I'm also certified with Dolores Cannon's school of quantum healing hypnosis. And both, when Michael Newton was doing this research, unbeknownst to him, a woman named Dolores Cannon was doing similar research in another part of the country. When they ran into each other, they realized, gosh, we're doing the same thing and getting the same results. So that was even more information that this process is real. And in her school, they concentrate a lot on having like a body scan done for you from the other side, where your higher self actually can do a body scan and see if he can find anything wrong with you, or to ask your higher self why you've made yourself sick, because people are going to find on the other side that something within them is actually some imbalance in their in their life or something, or in their way of thinking or whatever has actually made themselves sick. Okay. And with the Newton Institute now, what I do it a little differently. When they're before the council and they get all their questions answered, and then I'll say to you, I say, Jacob, ask the council now if because we have a few health issues, can we discuss those now? And they always say yes. And then I'll say, can Jacob have his higher self kind of take a look at his body to see, do a body scan, as we call it? Or do you have someone up here that's more qualified to do that? About 70% of the time they say, oh, the higher self could do it, but we have someone here more qualified. Instantly standing right before you is some being, benevolent, loving being, looking at you with like you think you're their best friend and saying, how can I help you? And first thing we'll ask is, okay, Jacob, ask them why you have this particular illness. You get the answer to that. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a man a few months ago who had some health issues. I forget the name of it, what it's called. It's a Swedish name. And when I've remembered it from time to time, people say, oh, I know what that is. It's where you don't have enough moisture in your mouth, saliva and that, and you don't have tears. So he has to constantly be putting eye drops in, drinking water and that all day. But he was losing 8 teeth because of not having that, the saliva that we normally have in there, and everything was happening. And he couldn't hardly see the computer screen anymore. It was messing his eyes and everything. He was miserable. So on the other side, they said, okay, this illness you have is caused because of the hatred you have for your father. They says it's the hatred you have for your father that's done this. And he didn't want to hear that. He's in trance and he's going, I don't want to hear that, but they were just telling him what it was, because he did have this hatred for his father. Then what we did was, I said, well, let's see if because his father's still alive. I said, let's see if you could have a conversation with your father here and find out what you can start doing to try to forgive him. And he didn't. He's in trance, but he's still, no, I don't want anything to do with him. And I told him, I says, look, you're in heaven right now. You're going to be talking to the higher self, because your father's still alive, physically alive. You're going to be talking to the higher self of your dad, who's going to be a dad, the kind of dad you wish you would have had. Okay. And so he finally said, okay. So they were able to have a conversation and talk about these things. And then at the end, they had both agreed that it was time to make things better between the two of them. Okay. Now I'll have to check with him in a few months, because this was recent, to find out if that's happened, because they told him, once you start working on this, forgiving your father, and you start healing this thing between you, they said your symptoms of your illness is going to improve. Okay. So we'll see what happens, but that shows you, the possibilities here.
Now, I'm sorry to cut you off. Have you ever had anybody that didn't believe in this tend to have their own experience?
Yes. I've had, I'll give you an example. A woman came to me because her husband had hung himself and killed himself as suicide. And she was totally, devastated, because this man she loved beyond, she said it was her soulmate. They had a great relationship. And when she came home and found him hung, it just destroyed her life. It was just so, she was not expecting that at all. So she went to some regular therapy, and that nothing seemed to be helping. And so somehow Spirit led her to hear about this process. And she goes, well, I'm not that spiritual. This sounds kind of weird, but I'm so desperate. I will try anything. Okay. So she came to me. She's not particularly a spiritual person. She says, look, I don't know how this is going to work. It's probably not going to work because this seems too weird, but I'm willing to try it. Like most people, they don't think that they can get into the state necessary, but almost everybody can. She went right into there. Anyway, long story short, we'll get to the other side. We were able we had to go through a few different levels, and we had a few missteps, but we kind of backed up and then tried another avenue. And finally, a guide shows up and says, yes, your husband is here and you can talk to him, but only for a few minutes. He comes out of this room and she's in trance there. I started crying because she's crying like crazy. Like, there he is. And it was this most Jacob, just to witness people having this stuff. And this is what makes it so real, because she's just embracing him and she's talking to him. And I said, okay, we have a list of questions here now, because I'm keeping her focused. Ask him why he committed suicide. And he told her, he says, sweetheart, it wasn't because of you. Our marriage was great, but there were some things you didn't know about me that happened through my childhood. And I just got in a bad place. It's stuff that I never talked to anybody about. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I decided to end my life. And he said, I'm so sorry. He was so apologetic that he had done that, you know. He said, look, when you pass away or something, you come back home or something, please, if you forgive me, we'll try another lifetime together or something. Okay. And then the guide came up and said, that's all the time we have for him now. And then her husband says, I'm really afraid where they're taking me. Whoa. So now we're thinking, is he going to go like to hell, or was something weird going to happen or whatever? And so we said, ask him where they're taking him. And then the guide speaks up and says, we're taking him right now to show him what his life could have been like if he hadn't committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that a loving, beautiful thing? See, that's the thing about we've, again, because I could talk for so many hours on this, Jacob, because there's so much to it. But we have not found, in the 70,000 cases, no sign of a everlasting hell, or, a horrible, like flesh being burned off your bones for eternity kind of thing. What we have found, though, is that there's what we call loving correction. In other words, when you get to the other side, when you've done a lot of bad things, like people that have murdered people or done like this, when they get back to the other side, the first person who is upset with what happened is themselves. When they get back up over there, it's like, what did I do? I blew it. I didn't go down there to do that, but man, did I get off track, and and so a lot of times souls over there, Jacob, what they'll do if they've done something like that, they'll put themselves in something, I just call it a timeout, like a purgatory, or like, like the Catholics have a purgatory, where means you're not quite ready for heaven yet, kind of thing. And they put themselves into kind of that state, knowing that they got more work to do, that they have to work on themselves. They have to figure out a way to balance the scales. So sometimes people will purposely incarnate into another life, and they will come down and they will experience what they caused others to do. In other words, karma. Okay. Like, you reap what you sow, as it says in the Bible, and sometimes that helps to balance out the situation. So in other words, anything that we do that's not coming from love, Jacob, is somehow has to be balanced in some way, shape, or form. In other words, and there's a way to do that, but there's a loving way to do that. It's like if you had a son, Jacob, and he throws a ball through the neighbor's window, and that, as a good father, what you would do is, you wouldn't take the strap out and beat the heck out of him for doing that. Okay. It was an accident. Okay. Or even if he did it purposely, if he was a juvenile and did it and whatever, being a loving father, what you're going to do is say, okay, you made this mistake, son. Okay. Now we have to balance that out. So you go over there and you find out, what you need to do. What do you need to do? Do you need to mow that person's lawn for 6 months to make up for that? Or do you need to get, your allowance that I'm giving you every week? Is that going to go pay for that? So in other words, you do it in a loving way, because you want your son to learn that lesson. You don't want to beat him every week, every day for 2 weeks, because he did that kind of thing. You want him to learn that lesson, So, then the son has to hit his karma. He's got to go over there. I'm just picturing, like in my neighborhood in the summer, it would have been, we're sitting sweating like crazy, pulling weeds and doing all this stuff and making up for what we did. And then pretty soon your debt's paid. You've learned that lesson. And I doubt if you would throw another ball through someone's window again, because that there's consequences. kind of thing.
I would like to go back to something you mentioned kind of earlier. You said that for the ones that does bad, they get put into a different life. Or reincarnated.
Yeah.
To another life. So they did bad and they got to fix it. They get put into another life.
Yeah. See, now here's the thing too. When something, in other words, say somebody here in this life, you go through some bad thing that you have to go through. Either that could be karmic, that you're getting paid back for something that you did for someone else in another lifetime, or sometimes souls on the other side decide to play different roles. Like sometimes your soulmate or the soul that you're closest to on the other side, they will decide on the other's life to come down and get married, and they're going to be, the husband decide he's going to be holy hell on her, and because they need to learn something. Okay, so sometimes your closest person that you're close to will play the part of your adversary or something, like a divine sandpaper, to wake you up. Okay, and here's an example of that. I had a woman in her 30s, and she came to me because she was grieving the death of her father. Even though her father, she said, he was the type of father that never held her, never told her he loved her. Nothing was ever good enough. He was like a drill sergeant kind of father, very emotionless. And even through that, though, she was always trying to please her father. She always wanted his love, which she never got here. He died, and she was devastated still because she never got that love. She never had that connection, So we see him. She runs into him on the other side, and she's in trance now, Jacob. She's in trance, and I see her kind of shaking her head and I say, "What's going on?" She said, "My father is smiling at me." She never felt a smile from her dad ever, and she was trying to, "What's going on here? Here's my dad I'm seeing, and he's smiling at me." And I said, "Yeah, this is your real dad, the one that's in heaven there." So I said, "Go have a conversation and find out why was he so hard on you." And what the father said to her was, "Sweetheart, what you didn't remember is that in our soul contract to come down, I was going to play the role of your father, and I was going to be this kind of awful kind of father that way because you needed to learn to be an independent woman. You needed to learn to be able to set boundaries in your life. You needed to be a strong woman, because these are things that you really wanted to learn as soul, And then she realized that. She goes, "Wow, that's what I've become." There were these good things that came out of that because of the having an adversarial father, that way. And so then I said, "Okay, I'm going to be quiet for a little bit. I want you just to have some time with your dad." And this is what happens too. Say, for instance, you see your mom over there or on the other side, and you're talking to her higher self. And I'll say, "Okay, Jacob, I'm just going to be quiet a little bit here. Just have a conversation. When you're done, then let me know what you talked about, because then we'll have it on the recording so you don't forget the conversation." Okay. So then I'm just quiet for a while. And sometimes people 5-10 minutes and then they'll say, okay, we're done. And I'll say, "Okay, what'd you talk about?" With her, she said it was the most beautiful thing for having this time with her father. She says, my father held me. We talked. He smiled at me. We learned everything. And it was like now she got to spend some time with the father that she wished she had, when he was alive. So it was very healing, very healing. And she got this bigger picture, that when we have people that are hard in our lifetimes, they're there a lot of times to teach us something, They're there, to make us strong or to make us, be able to stand up for ourselves, or how to deal with forgiveness, a lot of times that way.
Now, when people do these sessions, and is there a time limit to it?
No. Okay. Good question. Sessions usually last about 5 to 6 hours. Half of the session is going over the homework that I've had you prepare. In other words, I'm like the tour guide, and you're telling me, okay, when I'm over there now, Regan, I want to talk to these people. I want to have these questions answered. This is what I want to experience. Okay. And that's my job when you're over there is to keep you focused so you get that work done. Okay. And then we take a little break after a couple hours of planning everything. We take a little break. Usually I'll have like half of a peanut butter sandwich or something that keeps my energy going or something, bathroom break. And then we do the hypnosis part. Now, if you were having a session, Jacob, you're the one that decides when it's time to come back. Okay. In other words, but it always happens naturally. Like when you call up a friend and you're talking to them, there's a natural point when you just, okay, I got to go now, kind of thing like that. The hypnosis part can be anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 or 4 hours. I've had a few sessions go 9 hours, had one that went 10 hours,
Oh, wow.
another 8 hours. I tell you, it's like an all day thing. And it's intense because we're keeping it this very focused, intense energy for all that time. And it does something to me physically, that way. And they told me when I was on the other side, I was coming back and I was above the earth, Jacob. I was looking at the earth from space. My guide was there with me. And the earth looked so peaceful, Jake, from space, like when people have been up in the shuttles and stuff. It's just a beautiful place. It's just globe, just, floating in space, And my guide says, okay, Regan, are you sure that you want to do this work? And I knew what he meant, what I'm doing, working with the Newton Institute. I just knew instinctively he meant this work. Are you sure you want to do this work? And I screamed, yes. I'm in that state, but it was my soul so positive that I wanted to do this work. And so then he's taking me a little closer to earth. I'm in trance and I start having all this emotional pain. It was horrible. And he stopped. He says, Regan, now that you've decided to do this work, as you're getting closer to earth, what you're beginning to feel is all the pain and suffering of the earth. It was awful what I was feeling. And he said, because when you do this work, it's like everybody's had, got a sad story in a way in their life, traumas and difficulties and things like that. And he said, there's 4 things. He says 4 things that you have to do if you're going to do this work, or your physical body won't be able to handle all of the energy and you will die. And I said, okay, let's stop here for a minute. I want to hear these 4 things. But these are good things for people to hear. And I think everybody would benefit from some of these things he told me. First thing he said, when you wake up in the morning, you want to declare yourself as a vehicle for God. Okay. In other words, I heard a prayer in my mind. It was saying, bless this day and those that I serve as I keep 1 foot in heaven and 1 foot planted firmly on earth to accomplish my mission. Okay. So in other words, when people, and I think everybody listening now that hears this podcast, that's a good thing is when you wake up in the morning, just kind of go, okay, I'm here. What can I do to add to the love in the earth today? It puts you in, as you get out of bed, you're already put yourself in that mode that you're going to try to be the best you can be in the day. And by doing that, by the end of the day, you're going to look back and you go, wow, I put a lot of pluses on the board here today and just a couple of little minuses, instead of equal, that way. So it kind of keeps. The second thing he said to do is to spend more time in nature. He said that's God's gift to humanity and nature, because the energy of nature and everything like that will help to relax you, will help to heal you. Okay. And the third thing he said to do was to do as many random acts of kindness as you can. And I saw in my mind, I was walking in a 7-Eleven store and someone had dropped a wrapper on the ground, and I just reached down and picked up someone else's trash, put it in the bin. And I was going, whoa, I could feel that. And the fourth thing he did, had me do, is to talk to other therapists and find out what kinds of things do they do to balance themselves. Because us therapists, we're listening to people's problems all the time. Because I have a regular hypnotherapy practice too. Matter of fact, if anybody out there has fears or phobias or I specialize in PTSD, anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. And I have a very successful practice in helping people. I'm an energy psychologist. So in other words, I don't, talking therapy is just a very little bit a part of the session. What we do is we use modalities that actually get people fixed or back to normal really, really fast. One of them is EFT, which is this tapping. I don't know if you've had a tapper on your show. It's like psychological acupuncture that works like it's miracles happen with it. We could do a show sometime on that about energy psychology because it's taking over the field. So instead of people having to go and do talk therapy for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years or forever, usually in 3 or 4 sessions, even when I have people that come in with severe PTSD, after 3 or 4 sessions, they already have a semblance of normalcy coming back in their life. It's unheard of. But that's using, it's called emotional freedom technique, which is EFT. Some people call it tapping. The other one is havening. It's called havening touch, which is a very simple thing that people can do and learn in 5 minutes. And the other one is EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization. And these 3 energy modalities, I had a man that came into me. He was sleeping and his son came in and shot him in the head. And he put the gun right to his ear. And he shot his dad and it went in here, but luckily it came out down here. It didn't go up into his brain. So the dad, but he had a big scar here. And then his son died of a drug overdose a couple of weeks later. So he was devastated because he loved his son, but they were just he was trying to keep his son out of gangs because his son had joined a gang. And the dad had done that when he was younger and went to prison for a while. And then he grew up the dad grew up in prison and he saw his son making the same mistakes. So he was really hard on his son. And then his son thought, 21-year-old knows everything, right? So, you can't tell me, Dad, what to do. But anyway, on a scale of 1 to 10, when I had him close his eyes and think about the incident, I says 10 being your emotions are the worst they can be. He says, I'm a 23. I'm 23. I mean, that's how bad it was. Okay. We did the tapping with him in less than an hour. I had him close his eyes again after doing the tapping. And on a scale of 1 to 23, he said, it feels like I'm only at a 4 from 23. He came back for another session, went to 0. And 3 months later, the third session, it was at a 0. And so that's typically what happens with post-traumatic stress. What doing the tapping and everything does is it finds out wherever that disturbed energy is in the body that's making you feel like this with PTSD, and it takes that energy and pulls it back and puts the energy back home where it's supposed to be. And I watch people just calm down and it doesn't come back. Fears and phobias, sometimes people have had like phobia. A phobia is just we all have natural fears, like afraid of heights. You get to an edge, your body's saying, be careful, because you could fall over. But some people would be like this if they get to the edge of a roof, So what this EFT does is just, it takes that excess energy that's unnatural and calms it down, So sometimes I have people come to me, they've had severe phobias or fears for all their life. And in one session, they're gone. I mean, it's crazy. On my website, which is up there, visittheafterlife.com, there's 3 videos on there. You can see 4 veterans on there that are like this when they're talking about their issues because it's so bad. And watch what happens. After 4 sessions, they're talking about it like this. They go, I can't believe I'm thinking of my issues now and I'm not falling apart. And they stay that way. Anyway, that's a little off the subject here, but it's good for people to know, Jacob.
Now, speaking of your website, where can they purchase your book? Is it available on Amazon?
Yeah, or they go to my website. It's on there. They click on it. It takes them right to Amazon. Also, too, for being on your show now, too, if people want to request, I have a book that's my latest book. It's called Reincarnation is Real. And it's about it's an ebook. And it's about all the current research being done all over the world on reincarnation. And I would be happy if they say they heard it on your show. I'll send that to them for free. Okay.
Oh,
so they can just say, hey, get a free book out of it. But so now let's talk about reincarnation for a minute. Okay. Because a lot of people go, oh, that's a bunch of hooey, or that's not true, or whatever. Well, these 70,000, the way we get people to the afterlife, for instance, Jacob, if you were having a session and we want to get to afterlife, we have found that the easiest way to do it is to have you to go back to a memory that you have of a past life. You have that memory of dying, and you have the memory of who was there to take you back to heaven. Okay. So what we do is when you get deep enough, we have you go through, like you imagine, like the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, where you're floating down through this tunnel. And I'll suggest to you that when we get down to 1, you'll be standing at another place in another time. And people go through the tunnel, all of a sudden 1, and they're like, oh my God, oh my gosh, there's this other life that they have a memory of. Okay. And then what we do is we don't. I do past life regressions for people sometimes because that's all they want to do. They want to kind of start slow instead of going to afterlife. Says, well, let me just see if past life thing is true or not. So we'll go to that past life and we'll maybe spend an hour there going back and forth on the timeline when they were a child, what they did, what their experiences were. But for intents and purposes for this, we just do a treatment where we have you go to maybe 2 or 3 important events. And then we say, now, you'd be in trance, and I would say, okay, I'm going to touch you on the forehead, and now you're going to be at the very last day before you passed on in that lifetime, and tell me what's going on. And then you'd either be in a hospital, or you'd be on a battlefield, or whatever's going on in that life. And then you pass away, you're out of your body, and then I'm talking to you when you're in trance. You're looking down, seeing your body, like usually your funeral, who's there, where are they burying you, that sort of thing. And once that's done, I'll say to my clients, I say, now, are you ready to go back home? Half of the time now, Jacob, they say, no, I'm not ready to go back home yet. I said, why? And they'll say, because my daughter's grieving, so they're having trouble. It says, I need to stay around for a little bit and to let them know that I'm okay. And they'll say, okay, I'm going to be quiet for a bit. You get that done. And when you're ready to go home, back to the afterlife, then let me know. And that's where in our research now, there's a whole chapter in a book called Destiny of Souls. Journey. Okay, the books, people, if they're listening to this, the 2 books that'll change their life. Journey of Souls. That was the first book Michael Newton wrote in 1995. Okay, it's about how this began, and there's about 22 case histories in there. And people read that, and Jacob, when they do, something resonates in them, and they just go, oh my God, this is possible, Now, 10 years later, he wrote a book called Destiny of Souls. And that's when he had done several thousand more sessions and everything and found out even more. Okay. But in there's a chapter in Destiny of Souls. There's a chapter on how do people, when they pass on, what are the methods? What are the methods that people from the other side do to get through to us to tell us that they're okay? All right. Now, we've all heard, you probably have someone in your life or something that's happened where they had somebody die and they'll say, wow, grandma was in my dream last night. She was waving at me and smiling. Or someone woke up and they go, I saw a holographic image of the person that had passed on, or they'll say, every time we're talking about missing this person that just died, and every time we do that, the lights in the house blink on and off, and so one of the most popular ways, Jacob, that people have of letting you know that they're okay, they're just on the other side, is souls seem to have that ability to implant themselves in people's dreams. Okay, you could be having a nonsense dream, and all of a sudden, wow, there's grandma, and she's saying hi or waving or something like that. That's one of the most popular ways. But there was one case history we have where the man said he passed on, so his wife's still alive, and she's really grieving really hard. He said, I had this thing all the time. She always read books and stuff, and I would sneak up behind her and I would blow on her ear like this, and she would go, oh, what are you doing that for, honey? That was kind of the thing he always did with her. So he passed away. His wife's really, really grieving. Okay. And then what he did is he tried to use all of his soul energy. She's reading a book or something like this, and all of a sudden she goes like this, and she goes, "Oh my God, Robert! Oh my God, that's you, isn't it, Robert? Isn't that you, Robert?" You know, and then he says, "Now I knew it was okay, and now I'm okay to go back to heaven." Okay, so it's the only thing we found over there is light and love, and these 70,000 cases, every one of them went to a past life. Okay. There's the one of the things that's in my book, and the Reincarnation is Real, that I'm giving away free for any of your listeners. There's a book that just came out, published by the University of Virginia. They have a whole part of the university over there that's been studying reincarnation for 40 years. 40 years ago, somebody died and left them millions of dollars, and how they were to spend it with the university is to study reincarnation. So what they have done is they have only taken on cases of children that remember their past lives. This isn't done through hypnosis. This isn't anything. This is like a 3-year-old child coming up and saying, mommy, I have another mom and dad, or they'll say, "You're not my real mom and dad. My real mom and dad," boom. And all of a sudden they're going, "What are you talking about, 3-year-old kid here? Oh my gosh." So what they do is they send someone out to interview that child that's 3 years old and get as much information about what they remember, not in hypnosis or anything, but the child will remember, their other name, where they lived, how they died, all this kind of information. And then they send a team out to try to find out, did that really happen somewhere? In this book called Before, they have hundreds of cases of where they've been able to do that, where these little children, they were able to go back and prove that whatever those children said, there was a person named that another person that died that way, lived in this city, that had moms and dads named this and this. Pretty cool, that way. All you have to do is do the work I'm doing for a couple of weeks, and you just see people going to these past lives and having the experience, and then you go, okay, case closed as far as we're concerned. This is the thing, okay? So, but here's a different way of looking at it, Jacob.
All right.
If you look at it in the bigger picture, Jacob, we are only born one time, because we found out that where God created us is over there. We were created over there, not in the womb of the mother, okay? God created us in heaven. We're just down here having a human experience. When we're done with this human experience, the body dies, but we go back home. Okay. So right. in a sense, we're one life with many bodies. Okay. Rather than many lifetimes. So that's the real, it's just like how do you want to, from our limited viewpoint down here, yes, reincarnation is real, but over there, we only live one time and we just have many experiences and many bodies. So it's just a different way of looking at it, that way.
All right, Regan, I think we're about out of time for this episode.
Oh, okay.
But don't worry, because I'll be bringing you back on in the future.
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's so much to talk about. So yeah. Let me recap real quick. If anybody wants to have a session, which can be done on Zoom, or I'm in above San Francisco in Marin County, about 20 minutes from downtown San Francisco. I'm across the Golden Gate Bridge over here. It's one of the most beautiful places in the country. Because these sessions can be done on Zoom, doesn't matter where they are, they can be done. But I would like to, any of your people listening that want to know more, I would love to have a phone conversation with them first, and I'll explain the whole process, exactly what happens, how to prepare, and so forth. And then they can decide from there if they want to have a session. I just had someone that flew out from Connecticut to have a session, and I had a woman from Louisiana that flew up here, and I have people that come from hundreds of miles away to have a session, sometimes in person. But the fact that we can do it on Zoom now can be done either way. In my book, 3 hours, 33 minutes in heaven, all they do is go to visittheafterlife.com. Actually, it's a brand new website, Jacob, since I've talked to you now. Just published it last week, and it's all modernized. There's some great videos on there that explain the process. They could even watch a young lady going through the process on there. And they can learn about traditional therapy too, the energy psychology I'm talking about, in case they need some therapy. The world's crazy right now, and people are running to therapists like crazy. it's hard for to keep up with all the work because everybody's having all these, this year, don't you think, Jacob, this year is going to be one of the most interesting in history?
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But anyways, Regan, I want to thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely get you back on sometime later this year.
Sure. Let me know, Jacob.
Yeah, maybe next time we could do a longer episode.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, but just good that people know that there is this process now where if they want to go to heaven for a couple hours, learn a lot of about heaven, about God, about whatever, it's possible now.
Alrighty, so that wraps up this episode of Conversations with Jacob. Tune in next Monday for another interview. Until then, God bless, and we'll catch you in the next one.